Some video game levels are just expansive, huge, impossible to find your way around. Labyrinthian, in fact. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 more video game levels we all got lost in. Just a quick disclaimer, we've done a previous video on this where we did Tomb Raider, Planescape, Torment, Baldur's Gate, Dark Souls, Morrowind, Silent Hill 2, Curse of Monkey Island, Dark Souls, Halo, and Ocarina of Time. And we will be still mentioning some of these games, but if you're watching this video, we covered a lot on that previous video. So if you feel like something's missing here, maybe check that other one. Starting off at number 10, from The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, the Forest Temple. Now this is when the game gets serious about dungeons. This dungeon layout is no joke. The big thing is how easy to miss the keys are in this, and that's in no small part because of its confusing layout and otherwise pretty disorienting visuals. This is also a level that's weirdly creepy for a game as not particularly detailed as Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. It's in part due to the atmosphere, in part due to the music, and you end up having to backtrack so much that all you can focus on is that atmosphere because you're just doing something you just did. There's a lot of tricks and traps in this dungeon too. Like probably the biggest one is this huge fake out where you have to drop down a hole that looks like a bottomless pit. Like it seems like it's a definite death, but it's not, it's just a trick, like they're playing with your brain. To be entirely fair to this dungeon, however, it has one of the coolest bosses of the entire series at the end of it. On number 9, A Cold Day in Hell from the original Max Payne. Now this was a game that was super innovative in how it incorporated narrative into a third-person shooter. And like in pretty much every moment of the game, it's groundbreaking. Like it's such a great merging of storytelling and action. And it also has these dream sequences that just don't fit at all. Like they were so bad, I almost didn't continue playing the game. They're basically a maze, and you have to follow crying baby sounds to get out of the maze. But the baby sounds are not a good clue. They are a baby crying, for one, which is something that we're basically genetically not supposed to like hearing, but that's not really an effective means of finding the end of the maze. The worst of them is by far the second, specifically a part where you have to follow these trails of blood into a black void. It's just like really disorienting because A, the visuals are not, well, so you're not really sure what you're doing. But the blood trails are super narrow and you can easily fall to your death. So you need to quick save like all the time, if you haven't been anyways. I mean, we're talking about Max Payne here. But let me say that as far as emotional pain goes, the toll that a game can take on you, nearly making you quit, this part of the game is where the maximum amount of pain is. What are you doing here? Look at this. What are you doing?
Everyone makes mistakes.
At number 8 is The Fade from Dragon Age Origins. Now, it's not just that this is tough or anything, it's also extremely disliked by basically everybody who even loves the game. Dragon Age Origins is a really cool game. It's kind of the quintessential BioWare game, and it does so much with, frankly, not a lot as far as tech prowess goes. During the Circle of Magi questline, the Sloth Demon sends you to the Fade, which is basically a dreamscape where all the demons from Dragon Age come from if you're not up on the lore. Essentially, you have to fight your way out, and it is tedious to the max, as well as extremely long. The environment's dull as hell, barren, devoid of identifying markings, a confusing layout to say the very least, and you have to backtrack a lot, which I don't know where anything is. And what makes the rest of the game so strong, like the conversations you make and the choices, interesting environments and fantastical ideas, there's just none of that, just tons of enemies. Like this section is so easy to just get lost and confused and bored in. There is a popular mod for the game, among the most popular mods, that just skips this section. And number 7 is Blackreach from Skyrim. Now, here's the thing. This is one of the coolest environments in the game, bar none. If you stumble on it by mistake, it's probably going to confuse the living hell out of you. In fact, it might anyways. But whether you're searching or just happen upon it, it's cool. It's basically a big underground city that's filled with otherworldly stuff like glowing mushrooms, geodes emitting, it's just really cool to look at. One of the main features of this is an ancient race of dwarves that are obviously long gone. And this area is basically the ruins, and there's robots. Oh yeah, when there's robots in a fantasy thing, it's like mind-bending, and this is one of those sections where there's a bit of that. They're called the Dwemer, and you can find their ruins actually all over Skyrim, but this particular place is big. There's 4 main locations in this city. They're all very big and very confusing, with multiple large locations inside them. Basically, it's just this huge, I mean genuinely enormous interconnected dungeon that you need to know where you're going or you're not going there. Like, you're getting lost, period. There's no other option. Exploring is being lost for a long period of time. Now, the downside is that although there's tons of ground to cover, there's not a lot of loot for doing it. But that doesn't make it not one of the coolest areas in an Elder Scrolls game, even if it's super easy to get lost in. At number 6 is the Desert of Lost Souls in God of War 1, which is, of course, a desert full of wind and sand blowing everywhere that's disorienting enough as it is. The goal while you're here is to kill 3 sirens before going to Pandora's Temple, and like I said, you can't see anything. It's this massive desert environment, but the sandstorm effects are really the problem. It's not just a little bit hard to see where you're going in this level, and there's all these invisible walls that I assume are there because of the sandstorm. Like, that justifies invisible walls and makes them not weird. You basically have to find the sirens to kill by listening out for their songs, but they don't do a very good job of guiding you where. You've only got stereo sound, and the sirens are being drowned out by the sandstorm sound effect. The fact you gotta hunt down 3 of these things is bad enough, but the main problem is really just the desert itself. It's boring, it's bland, everywhere you look it looks the same, and it's just confusing. At number 5 is Ferren Keep from Dark Souls 3. It's basically just a big bog with 3 towers, and you have to light each up in order to continue. Like, it's not the hardest to navigate if you just want to light the towers. Like, they're all up on hills that stand out from the rest of the environment, but exploration in this area will lead to you getting lost. The thing is, there's a lot of incentive too. There's tons of loot, but you also have to deal with waist-high water that really slows you down, and it's also water, so it looks the same everywhere. And oh yeah, it's also poison, and there's swarms of annoying enemies coming at you basically all the time. Yeah, it's just basically another in the tradition of the terrible poison swamp area. Demon Souls had it, Dark Souls had it, this game had it. Thankfully, it's not quite as dark as those games. You can see, at least. But it is still more confusing, probably. The worst part of this section is these curse-spraying basilisks. They're, like, just impossible to deal with in water. The real question, though, is there an excuse? Do the developers just not know? Do they not understand how deeply we hate levels like this? No, they know, and they're sadistic. They put these things in these games to make us suffer. At number 4 is the Lair of the Blind Ones from Turok 2. Like, there's no getting around it. Turok 2 is itself really confusing. Like, it has all these GoldenEye style objectives with these giant sprawling levels and no in-game map to speak of. Nothing. The first couple of levels are confusing enough, and those are city maps. They've got a few landmarks and unique terrain to tell places apart, but the Lair of the Blind Ones? No, it does not. Nothing like that. It's just a big, confusing cave. It's dark, all the hallways look the same, objectives are super easy to miss, and you're backtracking all the time, a theme in this batch of levels. You're doing that in a gargantuan level such as this, desperately trying to find the last place to plant a satchel charge to complete your objectives. It was such a problem that the developers that remastered this game changed the level design. Normally you don't do that in a remaster. If you're like a purist or, for whatever reason, just like getting lost though, play the Nintendo 64 version, see what you think. And at number 3, way back on the Nintendo Entertainment System, pretty much the entirety of Metroid. Like, okay, so the original Metroid is a classic, and it's completely earned that place on the mantle. There is one big problem with it, however, there is no map. It was an early NES game, so the environments are very similar looking. Some literally copied and pasted, making it very confusing to have any idea where you are or where you're supposed to go for that matter. There's also annoying secret areas that you can only find by bombing random walls, which is annoying, but thankfully because of the copy-pasted levels, you at least kinda already know if you found them once because they're in the same place, in the same hallway that's in a different place. Wow, that is a confusing sentence. But it's just super easy to get lost in. Everything looks the same and you just don't know where you are. Doesn't stop it from being great, it's just, that's Metroid. At number 2, it's Vagrant Story's Snowfly Forest. Vagrant Story is a combination, weirdly enough, of basically Final Fantasy and Metal Gear. Vagrant Story is this conspiracy-laden plot of medieval intrigue with a really unique, real-time with pause battle system. It's also got a forest maze in it, and it seems like, forest mazes are just something that has to be confusing in an RPG. It's fairly early in the game, and it's one of those annoying mazes where if you go down the wrong path, it'll warp you back to the beginning, just like the Lost Woods in Legend of Zelda. It's just the confusing thing about it, it's not necessarily that. It's that there isn't some kind of a gimmick that guides your way through the forest. Like, you might think you're supposed to follow the snowflies through the correct exit or listen to some sounds or something, but no, you just have to trial and error the whole way through. Thankfully the game does give you a map that gets filled out as you go through the forest, so as you keep doing it, you can see the correct directions over time. But that doesn't compensate for how annoying it is to get lost here. On top of that, it is long. There is at minimum 18 rooms you need to correctly navigate to get through the end of this place, and there's two bosses that you have to fight. And finally, at number 1, the Water Temple in Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. If there's a level in the Zelda series famous for being incredibly frustrating, it's this one. It combines a maze, water puzzles, and a vertical layout to create a truly confusing experience with a gimmick that allows you to change the water level to progress you to different levels so you can exit in different ways. And this is the main problem, essentially. Each lever is at a different water level, and sometimes you need to pull one to access another to access the direction you need to go, and it's really easy to forget which lever changes what water level. So you end up running around in circles, repeating your steps and re-exploring areas you've already been, and continue to get more confused. There is a reason that people fear water levels, and it is Ocarina of Time's Water Temple. And that's all of them for today. These are all tremendously frustrating in their own special way. Some cases in a manner where it's actually eventually satisfying or good, but a lot of them not so much. What are your thoughts? Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you like this video, please click like, and if you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe, and do not forget to enable all notifications. As always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.